This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Today marks 15 years since little Alexis Patterson went missing near 49th and Garfield. The 7-year-old Patterson would now be 22 years old. She was last seen walking from her home to Highmount School this morning, as he has done for years. Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark laid a wreath outside the school in memory of little Alexis. However, her mother is confident she is still alive.
I've always felt spiritually connected with her. Again, I know she's coming home. I don't have a doubt in my mind.
The sheriff's office still offering a $10,000 reward for any information that leads to Patterson's return. Well, 15 years after Alexis Patterson disappeared, two figures remain at the center of the mystery. WTMJ Radio's John McCure has been investigating this, and he joins us with more. John.
Boy, Charles Shannon, those two men are Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark and Alexis Patterson's stepdad, Laurent Bourgeois. I spoke exclusively with both of them recently. It was on that May day in 2002. Laurent Bourgeois says he walked Alexis to her Milwaukee elementary school. Sheriff Clark doesn't believe Bourgeois.
Based on what you know, Sheriff, do you believe Laurent Bourgeois, the boyfriend, may have been involved in what happened to Alexis Patterson?
Sure. She wasn't dropped off at school. She was never at school. I don't care what the boyfriend's saying. She was never at school.
Now, there were reports that indicated that children at the school told administrators and investigators later they saw the girl on the playground before and after school, but never in the building that day. In a jailhouse interview, Bourgeois tells me the sheriff has no proof and is wrong.
Sheriff Clark need to go somewhere and get a life, man. You know what I mean? Really. I don't respect that man. I dislike him. You know what I mean? I really do. Tell him to put himself in my shoes.
Now, Laurent has repeatedly told me he's innocent. He's in prison on an unrelated charge, and he's never been charged with anything related to Alexis's disappearance. And Charles Shannon, there is still that unclaimed $10,000 reward that you mentioned earlier.
John, a couple big interviews there. Let me ask you this. Is Laurent considered a suspect? And how cold do police and investigators say this case really is today?
Good questions. You know, initially, Laurent was considered a suspect, and police say that he was at the time, and nothing has changed. The case, well, it's pretty chilly, but Milwaukee police say they do continue to pursue leads. They continue to investigate, and they're hopeful. And as I mentioned, two big interviews by you. We're going to have a link to the entire interview that you got there. So thank you for your time. Sounds good. Thank you.
News now from Milwaukee. The biological father of a missing girl in Milwaukee now charged with beating an 8-month-old nearly to death. The father of Alexis Patterson is sitting in jail right now for the disturbing allegations.
Cody Holyoke has the criminal complaint in hand, and he joins us now from the Milwaukee County Courthouse. Cody.
Charles, Carol, good afternoon. Kenya Campbell garnered a lot of attention over the last 11 years, the ongoing search for his daughter, Alexis Patterson. Now he is in jail. Jailers are keeping an eye on him after prosecutors maintain he beat a young girl within an inch of her life. Campbell lives with his mother and an 8.5-month-old girl, presumably his daughter. He is legally responsible for her care, according to the complaint. Campbell's mom, the girl's grandmother, told police Kenya ran in one morning and said the baby fell and split her lip. According to doctors, the injuries were much more severe. The girl had a broken jaw and rib, a broken neck, lacerated liver, even bruises throughout her body. Doctors were amazed the girl survived and believe the injuries are from what they believe is a violent, massive assault. Now, no word today on the baby's condition. It should be noted that Kenya Campbell, according to prosecutors, went to work after telling his mother that the baby had fallen. Now he's behind bars where he could spend the rest of his life if he's convicted. The man faces a bevy of child abuse charges. Live in downtown Milwaukee, Cody Holyoke, today's TMJ4.
Well, certainly a horrendous situation. Now, let me ask you, though, Cody, a question that maybe a lot of viewers are thinking right now. Given the allegations against Campbell, what do we know about the case with Alexis and where he was? I'm told at that point, when she disappeared, he was not a suspect.
And from what we can tell from Milwaukee police, that still remains true, Charles. There's no indication that Mr. Campbell had anything to do with Alexis's disappearance.
Such a horrific discovery today. Thank you very much, Cody. More breaking news now. And 7-year-old Alexis Patterson, we might mention, went missing back in 2002. Her stepdad walked her to school at Highmount Elementary. That is the last time anyone saw her. And again, no one has ever been arrested or charged with her disappearance. Well, 72 hours after we broke this story on TMJ4.com, here is what we know. 4 law enforcement agencies in Wisconsin and Ohio are following a lead in the Alexis Patterson cold case.
Now, this entire saga sparked by a man who is convinced his ex-wife is indeed Alexis Patterson.
Shannon Sims talked to that man. She joins us now to pick up the story. Shannon.
Josh married his wife in 2009 when Alexis Patterson would have been just 14 years old. Now that woman is at the center of an investigation connected to the missing Milwaukee girl.
I didn't even speak to the mother until there were 3 things that not just what everyone else could have. Anybody can have a scar under their eye and anybody can have a bump on their hand. But those 2 and the birthmark, and then you put pictures together, the resemblance, I don't know.
Phone conversation. The Ohio man tells me he contacted police last month after discovering Alexis Patterson's picture on the internet.
This was my chance to find out the truth and figure out who my ex-wife and her family really was, that I had to take this chance. I wanted to know for years.
Josh says he took a huge leap of faith and traveled to Milwaukee with his son. He met Ayanna Patterson, Alexis's mother. He believes she is his child's grandmother.
Like he knew her his whole life. He knew the kids his whole life. Like it was meant to be. My son has never been happier in the 6 years he's been alive.
Bryan, Ohio police confirmed that they interviewed Josh's ex-wife and took a DNA sample. The woman who denies she is Alexis Patterson provided documents, including a passport and a green card. And she indicated that she was born in Belize. Now it all comes down to DNA results to see if this woman really is Alexis Patterson.
We have our own kit that we know hasn't been tampered with in any way, and we have the other kit. And we hope they both come back with the exact same answer.
The woman's DNA sample was sent to Milwaukee police. In a statement today, MPD said, based on the interview and documents provided, there is no reason to believe that the woman in Ohio is Alexis Patterson. Live in the newsroom, Shannon Sims, today's TMJ4.
Welcome to episode 13 of True Crime XS. We're going to take a look at a lot of missing persons cases this year and a couple of cases where the bodies were found. From the killer's computer in the comparison searches was Alexis Patterson, which had an interesting link to another case.
I had trouble getting a good read on 2003 and into 2004 because they had mixed up, like it wasn't just paperwork mix-ups. There were like deliberate, there were receipts. And again, we're back to this, like, why does he have receipts from 2003 or 1999? In general, why does this guy have these receipts going all the way back? And that's from some of these later FBI searches, which we had 2 problems with. The first problem that we had was, like, they mixed a bunch of his partner's stuff in there. That's the last search, so we can kind of, like, parse some of that out. But the rest of it, you know, we thought, maybe this is alibi nonsense. So I spent all of 2003, and I was like, is he traveling? Is he not traveling? And where I liked him for was California. California was my favorite part, except he's got these 2. So there's the FBI timeline, and then there's the dark spot timeline. That's like the internal one that comes out if you FOIA this guy. And then there's 2 other internal FBI timelines, and none of them have much to offer. Like one is like financial transactions. One has like some limited phone records for later on. But I liked him for California. And I liked him, like I found there's like an accident victim there. There's like a roadside disappearance. There's like a late night thing. There's an early morning thing. Like I just thought that California was the place to be looking. Although I did take him, you know, on where he has these motel bills. I was like, no, he's got away from the house. Like, you know, maybe he's doing a little traveling. They're close. Like the motels are close to the house. And I was like, those receipts being in there sounds like an alibi to me. So particularly around those 2 dates, I was like, all right, I'm gonna see if he could do a spree. And I found some. And I found some unusual cases in the 2003 timeline that, like, once I got over the whole Lacey Peterson thing, because it wasn't that I liked him for that. I was just like, is that something he would read? Like, did he read about that and do something else? And I couldn't find anything going forward. But going backwards, I did find something. And that was, confusing for me because it maxed. Like, here's the weird part about it for me was this. So you've got this name, Alexis Patterson. And then you've got, that's a missing person, like a young African-American girl who went missing. But then you've got this Alexis kid that goes missing with his mom in a Laci Peterson type case. So then the word thing was messing up with me for a long time. Peterson, Patterson, Alexis. And like, I couldn't wrap my head around like there not being a connection there. Ultimately, do I think there is one? I have no idea. It's like the kid you could find, but the mom's already been found. So it's not a body to go hunting for. And there's other bodies that were found that year. So I sort of, I sort of dubbed 2003 the year of the body because I really think that one Yosemite case is his. I think it's his.
For a little bit of context, we're going to look at a case that starts in 2002 and sort of wraps up in 2003, although arguably it's still going even today.
It has been nearly 15 years since Laci Peterson, a mom-to-be from Modesto, California, was reported missing.
And tonight, Dateline NBC takes a fresh look at that infamous case through exclusive new interviews and newly discovered interrogation tapes. Here's Dateline's Keith Morrison.
It has definitely been a roller coaster since December 24th, 2002. There's many times that I get up in the morning and I just go back to bed.
Laci Peterson's mother, Sharon Rocha, told us her days of hiding under covers are fewer now. But there is still no escaping the pain that began on Christmas Eve 2002 with a phone call from her son-in-law, Scott.
It was close to 6:15 he called, and he said she was missing.
And that's how it began, the search for Laci Peterson, the one the whole country heard about.
We're still actively out trying to find a missing female alive.
What we didn't see back then was...
Just tell me about the morning. Okay.
I don't know what time we got up. Probably Laci got up and went and assumed she had some cereal for breakfast.
Here's Scott Peterson being questioned by the first detective on the case. 1 a.m., Christmas Day, 2002.
When did you realize you were going to go fishing? Oh, that was a morning decision. It's either go play golf at the club or go fishing.
Okay. So what you're telling me, Scott, is you have no idea where this is.
Never once did he say, oh my God, where is Laci? No. Where could she be? I hope she's okay. I hope, she's not harmed. Never, ever,
You were feeling that panic. Even as you talk about it, you can see a little bit of it left.
Yes.
He did not seem to have that sense?
He did not have it.
The police suspected Scott from the beginning, but Laci's mom did not, refused to believe it, until she turned up.
Okay, first of all, I met Scott Peterson November 20th, 2002. Scott told me he was not married. We did have a romantic relationship.
She was Amber Fry. Amber secretly helped the police by recording her calls with Scott.
As soon as I plug in her little recorder, the phone rings.
He called.
Oh, boy.
Amber. Hey. Hey there? I can barely hear you.
They were just like, wow, I can't believe he's calling you right now.
Hey, I'll be in Paris tomorrow. I'm outside. I'm annoyed with you right now. And hopefully the phone will be better.
Amber Fry. Her recordings, her testimony were the key. And with the whole country watching, Scott Peterson was convicted of murdering his wife, Laci, and their unborn son, Connor.
I'm never going to get over this. I don't say how any parent will ever get over it. You just have to get through it.
I remember covering that story.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's still on death row to this day.
Yes, he is. And you can see much more of this case on a 2-hour Dateline NBC special. That's tonight, 9, 8 Central Time, of course, here on NBC.
And I'm not even remotely suggesting that this killer was involved in that case, but it is linked to the comparison searches on his computer in the weirdest way. In May of 2002, there are 2 missing persons with the first name Alexis. The first is Alexis Patterson, and this is the second. Alexis Geraldo Hernandez disappeared with his mother Evelyn Hernandez. She was 24 years old in May of 2002. They were living in the Crocker Amazon neighborhood of San Francisco at the time of their disappearance. Evelyn was heavily pregnant with a boy, about 1 week away from her due date when she and her son vanished. She planned to name the baby Fernando. Evelyn was last heard from by her family on April 30th when she spoke on the phone to her boyfriend and two of her sisters, one of whom lives in the eastern San Francisco Bay Area of California, and the other who lives in Virginia. She spoke with her California sister about a baby shower her sister had planned for her. Evelyn took Alexis to daycare on May 1st and also used an ATM that day. Evelyn and Alexis were never heard from again. Her boyfriend reported them missing 1 week later. She had limited English skills at the time she disappeared, and she did not own a car. She was originally from El Salvador, had moved to the United States at the age of 14 to live with her mother. Most of her family lives in El Salvador. Evelyn and Alexis's passports were found inside of their home. Evelyn's wallet was found a short time after she and her son disappeared in a South San Francisco parking lot 2 blocks from the workplace of her unborn child's father. There was a disability check made out to Evelyn and $40 in cash inside of the wallet. A canal near the parking lot was searched, but nothing was located that pertained to Alexis and Evelyn's cases. Police originally thought Evelyn might have taken Alexis and left the area to have her baby in privacy, but by midsummer they suspected foul play in her disappearance, as nothing had been heard from them, and they had taken no personal belongings with them. Their suspicions were confirmed in July, when a badly decomposed pair of legs and a torso, clad in a maternity blouse, were located near the San Francisco Bay Bridge. DNA tests confirmed in September that the remains were Evelyn's. Alexis's body was not located. He has never been found. Neither was the rest of Evelyn's body nor her fetus. Alexis's biological father was in the United States Navy when his son was born. He has never known Alexis and is not considered a suspect in his son's disappearance or Evelyn's murder. Evelyn's murder remains unsolved. The father of her unborn son was a 36-year-old married airline mechanic whom she was dating at the time of her disappearance. He had been questioned and cooperated with police initially, but he has since hired a lawyer and stopped talking to investigators. He has not been ruled out as a suspect, but is not considered a serious suspect either. He was reportedly unhappy when Evelyn became pregnant. He had not told her he was married until after she announced her pregnancy. Evelyn, however, seemed to want the baby and was looking forward to his birth. The parking lot where her wallet was found is nearby a gas station used regularly by the baby's father. He claims that he was at home with his wife at the time Evelyn disappeared. There had been some speculation that Evelyn's murder and Alexis's disappearance may be related to the Laci Peterson case. She was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared from her Modesto, California home on Christmas Eve 2002. Her corpse was found in pieces in the San Francisco Bay in May of 2003. The fetus's remains were also found. Laci's husband, Scott, was convicted of capital murder in the deaths of his wife and unborn son. Some tabloid newspapers have suggested that Scott was involved in Evelyn and Alexis's disappearances because of the similarities to Laci's murder. They also suggested that Scott may be behind the disappearance of Kristen Smart, who attended California Polytechnic State University at the same time Scott and Laci did. Police have investigated both claims and say there is no connection between these cases. Evelyn was a legal immigrant who was employed as a vocational nurse at the time of her disappearance. Her loved ones say she was a devoted parent. It is unknown where Alexis might be or who killed his mother. He had attended the Buena Vista Elementary School in 2002, and his mother volunteered there. Alexis Hernandez was 5 years old, 4 foot tall, and weighed 45 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes. His nickname is Alex. Foul play is suspected in his case due to the circumstances involved. His case remains unsolved. And if you've been following along, you know that the killer has family in California, even to this day. But it was also a short drive from Washington or Oregon to these places in California. And the FBI has stated that that was the hotspot that they kept looking for, even after the killer's suicide. They wanted to know how many times he'd been in California and if anyone had seen him there. And before I even realized that this case was a part of things, or possibly a part of things, Meg pointed out that I seem to have an unhealthy obsession around this time with researching pregnant women from 2001 to 2004. But the reason was, I felt like the killer might be wanting to direct his rage somewhere specific or familiar. And for a brief period of time, I felt like other killers, he might have had a type. And that type, in 2003, might have been pregnant women. But I'm going to go through the list chronologically because it's not just pregnant women. Let's start taking a look at 2003's cases.
With Jennifer Markham, which I have a different killer attached to her, so I don't really consider her a viable candidate. Interesting story, but I don't think she's this killer. So one of them's an African American girl up in Wisconsin. That interested me because it's another young African American girl under the age of 10, and so that puts her in the same category as I should agree. But there was 356 missing persons cases still open from 2003. And, we had this whole list of crazy ones. John Hanneman, Carvalho, Mark Husk, Ace Anderson. There was Dean Lewis, Chalmer Tuttle, Tina Leone, which is another interesting one. Lisa Snellgrove and Nancy McDuxton. There was Michelle Hatfield, Michael Richards. There was Kristen Snyder, Raymond Johnson, Jennifer Markham, Ginny Dimmel's in there, Darlene Cooper, Jürgen Heiser's in there, Leslie Haney, Kathy Haskell and David Kors, Paul Harrison, George Woodsis. There was Norris and Shelby Hildy. That's not a missing person. It's a murder case. Selena Tackett, Ashley Eifert, Ricky Kitej and Roger Osborne. That was a couple that I looked at. June Goodman's in there. I looked at Trish Brennan. I looked at Billy Joe Smith, Rachel Good, the Tabitha case, Thomas Hazen, Jennifer Hammond, Laura Brown, Michael Howell's in there, Andres Slota's in there, Herman Arbus, Heath Reams, Christina Batten, Bjorn Talva. And then I also looked at Patrick Pinwell, Jimmy Rogers, Kim Walker, Daniel McCabe.
Ginny Margaret DeMel was last seen in Port Arthur, Washington on January 1st, 2003, after leaving her home with a large amount of cash. Few details are available on her disappearance. She has gray hair and green eyes. Ginny DeMel was 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed 160 pounds. She was 51 years old when she went missing. Her case remains unsolved. Ashley Marie Eifert was last seen in New Orleans, Louisiana on January 9th, 2003. She had gone to pick up baby furniture from Nicole Johnson, a woman she met at the doctor's office during a prenatal visit. Johnson had recently lost a child and offered to give Eifert her baby furniture. According to Johnson, Ashley was last seen near Franklin Avenue. She had tried to leave Johnson's home with the furniture, but her 1992 Ford Mustang didn't start, so she called her boyfriend for help, and Johnson saw Ashley arguing with him on her cellular phone. Johnson said that Ashley walked across the street to a gas station and was never seen again. It took months for Ashley's parents, who lived in Harahan, Louisiana, to recover their daughter's car. When reporters later tried to identify the location where Ashley was last seen, they discovered that the address was fictional. Police are trying to identify and track down Johnson, as well as Eifert's boyfriend, Joseph or Jose Lewis Hill, to interview them about the case. Eifert's parents remain hopeful she is still alive. Her father, in Harahan, has kept the same phone number in case she tries to contact him. Texas authorities are assisting with the investigation. Ashley Eifert was 19 years old, 4 foot 11 inches tall, and weighed just over 100 pounds. She was 7 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance. She has black hair and brown eyes. She has a tattoo of her name, Ashley, in script lettering on the inside of her ankle, and a small sun or sunflower tattooed above her breast. Her tongue is pierced. Her case remains unsolved. Selena Marie Tackett was reported missing by her husband, Tyrone, on January 30th, 2003. They lived in the Bluegrass Downs subdivision of Hendersonville, Tennessee, and had only been married for 1 week. Tyrone said he fell asleep, and when he woke up later that night, his wife was missing. She left her purse and car behind, but Tyrone says she took more than $60,000 in cash with her. Selena has never been seen or heard from again. Tyrone reported her missing the next day. The Tacketts had a 2-year-old daughter together who lived with them, and Selena had an 8-year-old son who lived elsewhere. Selena's best friend described her as a dedicated mother and stated that whenever she would leave her daughter with a babysitter, she would call several times to make sure everything was going well. She doesn't believe that Selena would have abandoned her children. Both Tyrone and Selena are originally from Kentucky. Neighbors of the couple said they had a troubled relationship and fought often. Tyrone had canceled their engagement twice before he finally married her. Selena's family says she was afraid for her life in the days before she vanished, but she did not tell them why. She told her loved ones she'd made a mistake when she married Tyrone. They had an argument the day of her disappearance, and she had asked him rejection or an annulment, Tyrone sold their home and moved to Florida with their daughter not long after Selena's disappearance. In July 2011, he was arrested for solicitation to commit murder. He allegedly had hired someone to kill Selena. He was extradited to Tennessee and jailed to await trial. However, in March of 2014, this charge was dropped when the 8-year statute of limitations on the crime ran out. One of Tyrone's relatives, Brian Tackett, filed a lawsuit against him in Mississippi in 2004. It was dismissed in 2005 due to procedural issues. In the court documents, Brian alleged that Tyrone had stolen construction equipment from him over a period of years, and that Selena knew about the theft because she was Tyrone's bookkeeper. According to Brian, Selena told others about the thefts, and Tyrone attempted to discredit her by claiming she was a drug addict. He later hired someone to kill her and make it look like a robbery. When this plan fell through, Brian alleges that Tyrone killed Selena himself. In December of 2011, while the solicitation charge was still pending, Tyrone was charged with first-degree murder in Selena's case. In March of 2014, he reached a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter in exchange for 3 years in prison and 2 years of probation. He claims he did not harm Selena and only took the plea deal because it was in his best interest. Selena's son lives in Kentucky, and Selena's mother has since died. Foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. Selena Tackett was 25 years old, 5 foot 3 inches tall, and weighed 124 pounds. She has brown hair with brown eyes. She may have blonde highlights in her hair, and she wears blue tinted contact lenses. She may use the last names Campbell or Harris. Selena has a tattoo of the cartoon character Winnie the Pooh on her groin. Chalmer Paul Tuttle was last seen on January 28, 2003, in Auburn, Indiana. Police are treating Tuttle's disappearance as suspicious because he left without his personal belongings. A slow cooker was found at Tuttle's home, still turned on, with burned food inside, and his pickup truck was recovered where it was apparently abandoned at the sale barn in Topeka. Chalmer Tuttle was 60 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed around 150 pounds. He had gray hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved. Kristen Marie Snyder was a self-employed environmental consultant who departed the Executive Services Program in Anchorage, Alaska, on February 6, 2003. Later that day, she was briefly seen at her home, but she's never been heard from again. The day after Snyder's disappearance, her Toyota Tacoma pickup truck was found located at Miller's Landing, which is located on Lowell Point Road in Seward, Alaska. Miller's Landing is a campground, fishing, and kayaking resort on Resurrection Bay. It rents out kayaks and runs a water taxi service. Snyder, an avid kayaker, has visited the resort before. There was a note left inside her car, insinuating she was depressed. The note stated she did not want to be found, and did not expect anyone to look for her. The writing, however, stopped short of actually saying she was going to take her own life. Snyder's friends stated that in the days prior to her disappearance, she had seemed depressed, irrational, and sometimes possibly suicidal. A whitewood and fiberglass kayak was found to be missing from the yard of Miller's Landing when Snyder's car was discovered. The kayak is handmade, has no rudder, is not outfitted for flotation, and had not been in the water for 15 years. Officials at the resort noted that it would sink if tipped. Authorities believe Snyder took the kayak out on Resurrection Bay. A 3-day search of the bay failed to turn up any clues as to her whereabouts. Snyder had a bachelor's degree from the University of Steubenville and a master's degree from the University of Kentucky, both in biology. She co-founded the Red River Gorge Climbers Coalition and is described as a great lover of the outdoors. A month after her disappearance, Snyder's parents held a memorial service for her. Police believe that her body is in Resurrection Bay. Kristen Snyder was 35 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 135 pounds. She had blonde hair and hazel eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Michael Roy Richards was last seen at approximately 7:00 a.m. on February 6, 2003, in the vicinity of the 600 block of Englert Road in Woodland, Washington. He left the area on foot, but his vehicle, a blue-gray mid-1980s model Nissan 200SX, is also missing. Richards has never been heard from again. His sister was in poor health at the time of his disappearance and does not believe he would have voluntarily abandoned his family during her illness. Richards' loved ones believe he may have met with foul play, possibly at the hands of drug dealers. Michael Richards was 28 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed around 150 pounds. He had blonde hair and hazel eyes. He has a tattoo of the name Tanya in black ink on the left side of his chest, and a tattoo of a scorpion in blue ink on his right bicep. His nicknames are Mike and Mikey. He may also use the middle name Ross. Richards had a methamphetamine addiction of 10 years standing at the time of his disappearance. His case remains unsolved. Thomas E. Hazen was last seen in Bridgewater, New Jersey on February 9, 2003. He has never been heard from again. He left with only his blue 1971 Chevrolet C10 van. It was sold in Florida in April, 2 months after Hazen's disappearance. Few details are available in his case. Thomas Hazen was 61 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and 136 pounds. He has gray hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved. Michelle Lee Hatfield was last seen in Allen, Texas on February 13, 2003. Few details are available in her case. Michelle Hatfield was 26 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed 100 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She has brown hair and green eyes. Her case remains unsolved. And then this happened.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign. More than 35 countries are giving crucial support, from the use of naval and air bases to help with intelligence and logistics, to the deployment of combat units. Every nation in this coalition has chosen to bear the duty and share the honor of serving in our common defense. To all the men and women of the United States Armed Forces now in the Middle East, the peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you. That trust is well placed. The enemies you confront will come to know your skill and bravery. The people you liberate will witness the honorable and decent spirit of the American military. In this conflict, America faces an enemy who has no regard for conventions of war or rules of morality. Saddam Hussein has placed Iraqi troops and equipment in civilian areas, attempting to use innocent men, women, and children as shields for his own military, a final atrocity against his people. I want Americans and all the world to know that coalition forces will make every effort to spare innocent civilians from harm. A campaign on the harsh terrain of a nation as large as California could be longer and more difficult than some predict. And helping Iraqis achieve a united, stable, and free country will require our sustained commitment. We come to Iraq with respect for its citizens, for their great civilization, and for the religious faiths they practice. We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people. I know that the families of our military are praying that all those who serve will return safely and soon. Millions of Americans are praying with you for the safety of your loved ones and for the protection of the innocent. For your sacrifice, you have the gratitude and respect of the American people. And you can know that our forces will be coming home as soon as their work is done. Our nation enters this conflict reluctantly, yet our purpose is sure. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police and doctors on the streets of our cities. Now that conflict has come, the only way to limit its duration is to apply decisive force. And I assure you, this will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory. My fellow citizens, the dangers to our country and the world will be overcome. We will pass through this time of peril and carry on the work of peace. We will defend our freedom. We will bring freedom to others, and we will prevail. May God bless our country and all who defend her.
We looked at several couples along the way, and the first one was shortly after that announcement was made in March of 2003. Ricky Joseph Kutej disappeared with his friend and coworker, Roger Osborne. They worked at a garage owned by Osborne near 5th Street and U.S. Highway 270 in Alderson, Oklahoma. They were last seen on the morning of March 26, 2003 in McAllister, Oklahoma. The two men planned to go to the garage to complete some odd jobs. Later that day, the police were summoned to the garage because it was empty. They found the garage open but deserted. Someone had been working with a bulldozer, and there was an overturned ladder and a small amount of blood on the ground. Authorities theorized one of the men fell off the ladder and hurt himself, but there was no record of either Osborne or Kutej seeking medical attention, and neither of them have ever been heard from again. Osborne and Kutej may be traveling with a black 1999 Dodge Ram 3500 pickup truck with Oklahoma license plates and custom aluminum parts. Ricky Kutej was 43 years old, around 6 feet tall, and around 200 pounds. He has dark brown hair and hazel eyes. His nickname is Rick. Roger Osborne was 62 years old and around 6 foot 3 inches tall, weighing over 200 pounds. He has graying brown hair and blue and hazel eyes. He wears prescription eyeglasses and has a gray beard and mustache. Their cases remain unsolved.
You know, there's not that many names on this list, and I can't figure out why some of them have the wrong dates with them. I mean, 2002, 2003, all that time period is already confusing enough, after he gets out of the military. But I was just wondering if someone can assist me. I know how to find the real dates. I want to find where the error is because I want to see if it's on our side or if it's on the side of the FBI. Because that could change something. Also, man, a lot of these cases just got dumped into NamUs way later. These missing persons from this year, some of them weren't even in here until 2016, 2015. It's crazy.
June Goodman was last seen at 8:25 p.m. on March 28, 2003, purchasing groceries at Ed's Market in Snowflake, Arizona. She apparently drove back to her home after shopping and turned on her television and was missed the next morning when she failed to show up for work. Authorities believe she was abducted from her home early on the morning of March 29th. The sliding glass door to Goodman's residence was found ajar and the floodlights were on. Inside, the television set was on. Everything she owned was left behind in the house, including her billfold and all of her shoes. Her work van was parked in its usual place. Her daughter had borrowed her other vehicle. There was no sign of a struggle inside of the residence. After Goodman's disappearance, authorities began to look closely at Patrick Michael Kahn, 44, who lived along Goodman's mail route. The two had a confrontation in early 2002. And Goodman said she was afraid of Kahn. In February 2002, a snowflake man named Donald Sewell was shot 13 times. His body was found in his car along the side of State Route 77 in the undeveloped northern part of Snowflake. And Kahn is the prime suspect in Sewell's homicide. Kahn has since disappeared. He may be living in Hocking County, Ohio, where he has relatives. Authorities are also interested in speaking to a Snowflake area handyman who was hired to repair Goodman's television set a month before she disappeared. He brought it back still broken, and Goodman mentioned she felt uncomfortable around the man. The man is now in police custody on drug charges unrelated to Goodman's apparent abduction. Goodman was born and raised in the Snowflake area. She is a widow with 4 children. She also had 18 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren at the time of her disappearance. Her family says they were very important to her, and she would not voluntarily leave without warning. Goodman has work experience as a teacher's aide. At the time of her disappearance, she was employed with the Snowflake Post Office as a rural mail carrier. She was due to retire from her mail route in July of 2003. Goodman enjoys quilting and is an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Goodman's family held a memorial service for her in September of 2008, 5.5 years after she disappeared. She was 66 years old, 5 foot 2 inches tall, 130 pounds. She has brown hair and green eyes. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance due to the circumstances involved. Her case remains unsolved. And Meg had given me enough victim types at this point that I had a pretty good roadmap of the type of people that I was looking for. The problem was they could be anywhere and at any time. So we just kept plugging to see what we could find in 2003 that might pique our interest or lead us to locations of bodies. Meg remained focused on the remote victims, and she remained focused on trying to make sure that we were able to come to some form of logical conclusion from all of this time and all of this research that would lead us to some answers about this killer.
So once we cleared up like the research and, figured out which cases came from which year there, I mean, I have him on a spree still. I like him for these little sprees because that seems like something that feeds the compulsive driving, the no witnesses, the far from home. And, I've noticed that like a lot of these cases, the early morning cases and the late night cases fall on him. And the way it's outlined right now, so we have Pebbles or Bam Bam, the kids. Those are the snatches, right? Then we've got Betty's, and then we have Daphne's. Daphne's are the bridge between them because Betty's are older and they have to be taken usually with some kind of weapon. So Daphne is like the Samantha Koenig type cases, I guess. Daphne or Freddie, ever how you want to, label that. On the board it says Daphne, so that's what I'm going with right now. And then there's Shaggy. There's these people that disappear from like bars, like where they're probably inebriated. And we see quite a few of those like later. And those like missing people are pretty interesting. And then we have Popeyes, and that's people that go missing related to boats.
George Woltzeff was last seen in Kent, Washington on April 21st, 2003. George was 6 feet 2 inches tall, 150 pounds. He was 47 years old. He has blonde hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved.
Tabitha Danielle Chuders was last seen by her family at approximately 7 o'clock a.m. on April 29, 2003, when her father woke her up in their home in the 1300 block of Lillian Street in Nashville, Tennessee. She was watching television when he went to work. She was supposed to board the school bus at 8 o'clock a.m. at 14th Street. Witnesses saw her walking in that direction. She was reading some papers as she walked and didn't appear to be in a hurry or looking for anyone. Tabitha did not get on the bus and never arrived at Bailey Middle School, 2 miles away. Her parents contacted the school that evening when she failed to return home. When they found out she had been absent from school that day, they reported her missing shortly before 6 o'clock p.m. She does not have a history as a runaway, and her parents cannot think of any reason why she would want to leave her home. She was a straight A student with a perfect attendance record. She was active in the choir at Eastland Baptist Church, and there is no evidence that she had a boyfriend. She was supposed to go visit the Six Flags of America amusement park in Louisville, Kentucky 2 weeks after she disappeared, and was very excited about the trip. She left behind all of her possessions, including her clothes, makeup, and $20 in cash. Authorities initially treated Tabitha as a runaway due to her age, but they now believe she was abducted. Her parents and 2 adult siblings were all investigated, and none are being called suspects in her disappearance. A neighborhood boy told police he saw Tabitha get into a red car with a man on the morning of her disappearance. He described the driver as African-American, 30 to 40 years old, wearing a baseball cap. The witness stated once Tabitha was inside the vehicle, he reversed course and headed back up the hill. The boy's story has not been confirmed, and some investigators doubt his credibility, but tracker dogs traced Tabitha's scent along a route similar to the one described by the witness. The dogs eventually traced her scent into an alley, a place Tabitha's friends say she would never have gone alone. Tabitha's sister's former boyfriend matches the description of the driver. He drove a red car, and he knew where and when Tabitha took the bus to school each morning, but police have never been able to connect him to her disappearance. Her parents stated they did not believe she would have gone willingly into a car with anyone other than a family member. A piece of paper found in Tabitha's room after her disappearance may have some connection to her case. The paper reads, in Tabitha's handwriting, TDT-N-MTL. TDT are Tabitha's initials. The initials of the other person are unknown. Also found was a business card with Tabitha's name, address, phone number, and the notations, call me, and sexy girl, the latter of which was crossed out and rewritten as ghetto girl. The card turned out to have been given to Tabitha by a friend, though, and has no connection to her disappearance. Police searched the logs of a computer at the local library, where Tabitha is said to have visited internet chat rooms, but turned up no information pertaining to her disappearance. A man who was arrested for trying to lure an 11-year-old girl into his car 4 months after Tabitha's disappearance was looked at as a person of interest in her case because of the nature of the crime he's charged with and because the alleged incident happened just a few blocks from Tabitha's home. There is no evidence connecting the man and Tabitha, however, and he was eventually taken off the suspect list. On October 30th, 2003, a trucker reported a possible sighting of Tabitha in Linton, Indiana. The trucker saw a girl accompanied by a man and another teenage girl. The girl, who looked like Tabitha, appeared to be anxious and afraid. Later, when he saw a missing persons flyer of Tabitha, he realized that she resembled the girl he'd seen and contacted police. A hotel clerk in Linton also saw a girl resembling Tabitha with a man and a teenage girl and reported it. These sightings have not been confirmed. August 19, 2003, almost 5 months after Tabitha's disappearance, an 11-year-old girl named Heaven Ross disappeared while on her way to school in Northport, Alabama. Her remains were found in Holt, Alabama, 3 years after the disappearance. Her murder remains unsolved. Like Tabitha, Ross had light-colored hair and disappeared in the morning hours on the way to school. Authorities are considering a possible connection between the girls' cases, but the distance between Nashville and Northport is great, and so far, no evidence has been uncovered to link the two cases. Investigators are not sure what happened to Tabitha, but they believe she is in danger. Tabitha Tudors was 13 years old, around 5 feet tall, and around 95 pounds. She was last seen wearing a light blue shirt, mud jeans, and Reebok sneakers. She has sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. Her ears are pierced. Her case remains unsolved. Timothy Darrell Case. Timothy Darrell Case's family last had contact with him sometime in May of 2003. He was living in the Boulder, Colorado area at the time. He has never been heard from again. His brother reported him missing 2 years after the last contact. Few details are available in Case's disappearance. He was around 6 feet 1 inches tall and weighed 140 pounds. He had gray hair and hazel eyes. He may have a beard. His case remains unsolved. Laura Ann Brown was last seen in Rochester, New York on May 7, 2003. She has never been heard from again, and few details are available in her case. Laura Brown was 49 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 110 pounds. She has black hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Patrick David Pinwell was last seen in the vicinity of East Indian School and North 21st Street in Phoenix, Arizona, sometime during May of 2003. He has never been heard from again. Few details are available in his case, but foul play is suspected. Patrick Pinwell was 21 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed 170 pounds. He has blonde hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved. And while researching the 2003 cases, I realized that Meg was going to have to be more specific when she talked about boats, because sometimes really weird stuff can happen on boats. And this incident had ties to the Samantha Koenig case related to the alcohol involved, but it also had ties to someplace I'd been looking the previous year in Vancouver. From the website cruiseshipdeaths.com, May 16, 2003, Randall Paul Gary, 50, was a psychotherapist from Toronto with diabetes who had gone missing somewhere between Ketchikan, Alaska and Vancouver while sailing aboard Holland America Line's Van Dam on May 16, 2003. A search was made and he couldn't be found aboard or in the sea. A week earlier, the night before the cruise left Vancouver, Randall Gary had stopped by to see his sister Lynn Gary at her hotel. She was sleeping and didn't answer the phone when the desk called her, so he left a note and $500, then continued on to take his cruise. When the Van Dam docked at Canada Place at 0800 hours Sunday, May 20th, 2003, Randall had not settled his bill for his cabin number 104, and it had a balance due of $127. That's when the staff went looking for him. The following facts create a puzzling sequence of events. When the stewards went to check, they found the Do Not Disturb sign on his cabin. It had been there most of the cruise. The double bed showed signs of somebody being on it, but not sleeping in it. It was an outside cabin with a sealed window and no balcony. All of his belongings seemed to be in the cabin, including his passport. His wallet was there with cash in it. His credit card and driver's license and the key card to the cabin were also there. Staff found his watch, a package of Viagra, an unopened box of insulin, and a log of his blood sugar levels that included readings up through Thursday. They also found several brochures for his new counseling practice. Someone had been drinking in the cabin. There was a partially consumed bottle of rye, a half-full bottle of red wine, and an empty bottle of Bollinger champagne. Randall hated champagne, never drank red wine, he was allergic to rye, and due to his health problems, he rarely drank at all. His brother was in contact with him almost every day. The brother says Randall seemed happy and was excited about the cruise, and was excited about launching his new business. A few years prior, he trained to become a professional counselor and had recently opened his own practice. He had just taken out 100 advertising spots on a radio station in Toronto and was to do some on-air spots himself when he returned. Randall was a bit of a ladies' man. His brother says that Gary told him he was taking the cruise alone,
but hoped to meet a lady. He says Gary told him, "I'm going alone with a great expectation of meeting my Penelope Cruz from Vanilla Sky on board." He planned to have lunch with his brother when he returned from the cruise. Vancouver Police Detective Bolton received a passenger manifest from Holland America of women who were traveling unaccompanied or traveling with other women on Veendam's cruise to Alaska that week, both the married and the single. There were 300 of them. They sent Randall's photograph to them, and of the 300, less than a dozen responded. According to police, Gary spent most of the nights at the casino. He was a late riser who didn't like the steward in his room. On one particular occasion, he complained that the steward had been slow in delivering ice. And after that, the steward complained to his superior that Gary was being difficult, and he was having a hard time getting into the cabin to do his job. Clearly, there was friction between the two, with Gary not getting the service as he desired. Gary told many people that the trip to Alaska was some kind of lifelong dream, yet he never bothered to go ashore when the ship docked in Juneau or Skagway. He had switched his restaurant seating assignment after the first night, requesting that he be reassigned to a table with 4 women, 2 of them middle-aged sisters from Victoria. The sisters were interviewed by police, but say they only saw him at the meals. They didn't socialize with him otherwise. In Ketchikan, he bought postcards of whales, seals, and eagles and mailed them to 13 people back home, including his mother. The same day, the ship's log shows Gary leaving the ship again in Ketchikan at 18:19 hours and reboarding at 18:28 hours, 2 minutes before the ship set sail. That 9 minutes would have been just enough time for him to run to the dock and make a call from a payphone. His sister says he may have left the ship to call her. May 16th was her birthday. That night, the restaurant's formal evening, Gary was joined at his table by a ship's officer. Staff say he was seen in the casino later, as usual. There were 3 sightings of him on Saturday, the last day at sea. A woman waiting for an elevator says she had a brief conversation with him. Someone also saw him talking to a woman with shoulder-length blonde hair at afternoon tea. At about 22:30 hours, an elderly man whose cabin was just down the hall from Gary's saw him with 2 women who appeared to be leaving his room. One of them, the man told police, was a woman in her 30s who had shoulder-length blonde hair, and Gary had his arm around her. But he could have been mistaken and seen this on Friday night instead. On Saturday, despite the privacy sign, the steward entered the cabin, he says, because he needed to do his job and decided to ignore the sign. Some point out that it would have been painless for Gary to kill himself with insulin instead of jumping overboard. But of that and his business plans, jumping overboard is not likely a possibility. The problem with the man accidentally falling overboard is that his key card was found in his room. He would have to accidentally lock himself out of the room and then accidentally fallen overboard during that period of time. It is possible he may have locked himself out of the room and then sought help from cruise staff to get back in. He may have left the cabin with cruise staff for some purpose and didn't take his key because staff was already with him and would let him back into his cabin. Then, during that time, something happened to him. The cruise line didn't bother dusting for fingerprints and took no photographs of the cabin to preserve the crime scene. In late 2001, he won $150,000 on the lotto, but his family only found out about it after he disappeared. This indicates that he kept things, probably many things, from those close to him. Gary had talked to people about his dream of starting a curling club in Arizona. His sister says he had spent several weeks in Phoenix around the time of his secret lottery win and had conducted a number of self-help seminars there. While on the cruise, he apparently told one passenger he was from Texas. He told someone else he was in the construction business. Both statements are a lie if he actually made those statements. According to police, Gary spent most nights at the casino, a late riser who didn't like the steward in his room. He's never been seen or heard from again. I had wondered if the killer had ties this early to Alaska, but I doubted it. I still looked at a few cases there just to cover all of our bases and wrap up the year 2003. Trish J. Brennan was last seen in Easton, Pennsylvania on July 16, 2003. She has never been heard from again. Although she was thought to be homeless at the time of her disappearance and is a known drug user, her loved one characterized her disappearance as very unusual. Few details are available in her case. Trish Brennan was 25 years old, 5'4" tall, and weighed around 140 pounds. She has black hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
John J. Hanneman was living at 25 Victory Lane in Parsonsville, Maine by himself. A neighbor saw John on July 21, 2003 while driving by his house, leaving Victory Lane in the morning. John's house was destroyed by fire on Thursday, July 24, 2003. This was a small camp-style home with no power or running water. John's dog was found to be in good health wandering around the area of the residence, and John's vehicle A 1992 Ford Explorer was destroyed in the fire as well. The fire marshal's office found no sign of John's remains at the residence. An extensive search was done by the warden's service in the following days, but John has not been located. John Hanneman was 41 years old, 6 feet tall, and 160 pounds. He had brown hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved.
I've got an interesting candidate for that accident victim that you've been looking for. If it is a hiker, I know we looked at Danny Curran, but this guy wasn't found for a long time. You might want to take a look at this one and tell me what you think about him.
Fred Clausen disappeared on a hiking trip in Yosemite National Park in California on August 1, 2003. He was 46 years old. His remains, along with his backpack and hiking gear, were found near the foot of Worrell Mountain in September 2010. It appeared that he had died in an accidental fall. Chris Robert Jacques visited some friends in Spy Rock, California during the evening hours of August 9, 2003. He left at approximately 9 o'clock p.m., driving his blue 1994 Toyota four-wheel drive extended cab pickup truck with a California license plate. He was on Spy Rock Road, headed for home, approximately a 2-hour drive away. Chris never arrived at his intended destination and has never been heard from again. He was reported missing 2 days later, on August the 11th, and 2 days after that, on August 13th. His truck was located near the Avenue of the Giants, 4 miles south of Myers Flat. This is north of the place where he was supposed to turn off to go home. There were no signs of either Chris or any foul play around the truck. Prior to his disappearance, Chris was an activist promoting the legalization of marijuana for medical use. He had been arrested and jailed several times, and his home had been raided due to his involvement with the drug trade. He was on probation for marijuana cultivation at the time of his disappearance. He sued law enforcement officials because they confiscated an ounce of marijuana at a traffic stop a few years before his disappearance. A judge eventually ordered the police to return the marijuana to Chris, but the order was not given until after he went missing. He reportedly sold over 100 pounds of outdoor marijuana for $100,000 cash on the night of his disappearance. He had an additional $1 million in cash buried behind his home. It is not known whether his involvement with marijuana has any bearing on his disappearance. His family says he was not involved with any other illegal substances. He is described as a nonviolent and generous person. Investigators don't believe that Jacques left of his own accord. He has never done so before, and he had married 2 weeks prior to his disappearance and had planned a honeymoon in Maui, Hawaii. Police theorized that his disappearance is the result of a robbery homicide. He was known to carry large amounts of cash on him and was allegedly doing so the night of his disappearance. No evidence has been located to support the robbery theory. He was legally declared dead in 2010. Chris Jacques was 36 years old, 6 foot 1 inches tall, weighing around 150 pounds. He was last seen wearing orange or red Carhartt pants and 2 shirts. One was a red, orange, and white Hawaiian print shirt. The other was a t-shirt of unknown color. He has sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. At the time of his disappearance, Chris had 4-foot-long dreadlocks and a full beard. He may use the alias James Anthony Beam. His case remains unsolved and is investigated as a homicide. Nancy Jean McDuxton was last seen by her adult daughter at home in the 2000 block of Belmonte in Belmont, California on August 11, 2003. At approximately 8:30 a.m., she left her home, telling friends and family that she would be shopping in Davenport, California that day. McDuxton was seen shopping at the new Davenport Cash Store and Restaurant at about 10 o'clock a.m. and at the Davenport Post Office sometime between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. Later, between 5:30 and 6:30 p.m., McDuxton was sighted at the new Davenport Cash Store and Restaurant again, eating dinner with an unidentified man and appearing very happy. The man is not considered a suspect in McDuxton's disappearance, but police would like to identify and question him. He and McDuxton appeared to have a romantic attachment to each other. McDuxton was also seen at the Whale City Bakery sometime on August the 11th. She has never been heard from again. Her husband reported her missing the next day at 9 o'clock a.m. On that same afternoon, McDuxton's minivan, a tan 2001 Mazda MPV with a California license plate, was found abandoned near some cliffs and a beach on Highway 1 near Davenport in northern Santa Cruz County, California. 5 miles north of the New Davenport Cash Store and Restaurant, one of McDuxton's favorite places. There were gifts locked inside the van. There was no sign of McDuxton near the scene, but some of her belongings were located in the area. Investigators found a folding chair, a blanket, a book about travel in Australia, sunglasses, and a bright pink sun hat near Greyhound Rock, about 100 yards from the van. It appears that McDuxton may have been reading on the beach. McDuxton is said to have made some long-term arrangements with her workplace before she disappeared. Police do not suspect foul play in her disappearance, and there are indications that she may have left of her own accord, but she was not having problems at home or work, and her husband says it would be unlike her to leave behind her young granddaughter. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance are unclear. Drawing on the subject of the book that was found near the van, investigators have looked for McDuxton in Australia with fruitless results. Suicide was also considered as a possibility, as the cliffs near where her van were parked are known for suicides. A sheriff's dog tracked McDuxton's scent to the cliff's edge. However, she had no history of depression or other mental illness. McDuxton is a graduate of the University of California at Santa Barbara. She is described as an organized, dedicated person and a nature lover who enjoys exploring back roads and isolated areas. She and her husband moved to Belmont in 1979. They have a grown daughter and son. Nancy McDuxton was 52 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and 125 pounds. She has dark blonde hair and blue eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
And there was a really weird Oregon case that I took a look at. However, someone was convicted and then it was overturned, and the complicated legal process goes on with this case. I'm not saying it was this killer. I'm just saying it's an interesting case from that time period from Oregon. I'll include a link in the show notes to a further explanation. From the Daily News on August 24th, 2003. Lamola Lake, Oregon. The authorities in Douglas County have identified 2 campers shot this week in the Umpqua National Forest. Norris Lee Hildy, 52, was killed in Thursday night's attack, and his wife, Sherry Ann Hildy, 45, remained in critical condition on Saturday. According to police dispatch logs, Norris Hildy used a cell phone to report that his wife had been shot. Soon, he started screaming. His wife managed to get on the phone. She said her husband had also been shot and was unconscious. She said she couldn't move her legs. Sherry Hildy said she was in her trailer and that she and her husband were the only 2 people in the camp. The Roseburg area couple were parked in a meadow at an old mill site off the North Umpqua Highway. The location is at an unimproved camping area not far from Lamola Lake. The Douglas County Emergency Communications log says Sherry Hildy told emergency medical technicians that they wanted the truck. Hildy is now in critical but stable condition at St. Charles Medical Center in Bend after being shot in the chest at least 1 time. Hospital staff at St. Charles Medical Center would not acknowledge that Sherry Hildy was in their care on Saturday, but her father, Arthur Ennis of Roseburg, said authorities have told the family that his daughter has a bullet in her body which may be lodged near her spine. The Hildy's son, Norris Hildy Jr., 25, is a firefighter, now returning from a wildfire in Colorado, relatives said. Their younger daughter, Chenoa Hildy, was brought home from summer church camp by a pastor after learning of the shooting. Sheriff's Lieutenant Kurt Strickland said investigators have contacted hundreds of people as they search for leads. The people who lived near here were stunned by the shooting. Everyone is freaked out because that kind of thing just doesn't happen around here, said Debbie Baker, a Diamond Lake resident. Nobody knows anything. The cops are saying nothing, so nobody knows anything, she said. To my knowledge, there's never been anything like this, except for a few hunting accidents. I've lived here for 20 years, and this is just too close to home. Lorene Roosevelt, a family friend, said Norris and Sherry were looking forward to a camping trip and a little bow hunting. Norris formerly served in the U.S. Marine Corps and Army National Guard, she said. He survived Vietnam and is killed like this? This just really bothers me. We still can't believe that Norris is dead. Leslie Allen Bruce Haney was last seen at an acquaintance residence in Mojave Valley near Bullhead City, Arizona. He has never been heard from again. His red 2000 Chevrolet S10 pickup truck was later located in the vicinity of Plantation Drive and Ranchero Road in Lower Mojave Valley. Few details are available in Leslie's case. He is missing under unknown circumstances. Leslie Haney was 30 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and 230 pounds. He has brown hair, hazel eyes, and he may have a mustache. He has the following tattoos: the cartoon character Speedy Gonzales on his right shoulder, his last name, Haney, on the inside of his left bicep, and a happy face and a sad face on his upper right arm. His case remains unsolved. And then I chased a case of another person who was someplace they weren't supposed to be when their body was found. From the Daily Item of Lynn, on Friday, September 9, 2005, Lynn woman's murder remains mystery to cops.
Who killed Tina Louise Leon? 2 years have lapsed since the 39-year-old Lynn woman's battered body was discovered along a rural Maryland road. According to police, Leon was killed by blunt trauma to the face and stab wounds to the neck. A passing motorist spotted her corpse about 20 feet into the woods on Stepney Road in Aberdeen, 30 miles northeast of Baltimore. It was September 14, 2003, just after 7 a.m. Although she was abundantly tattooed, investigators were unable to learn her identity, so Leon was classified a Jane Doe. A preliminary assessment by Maryland law enforcement authorities suggested the woman was killed elsewhere, her body dumped here in a remote place where witnesses would be unlikely. No weapons were found at the scene. Edward Hopkins, a spokesman for the Hartford County Sheriff's Office in Bel Air, Maryland, noted that Stepney Road is isolated, yet less than a mile from Interstate 95. As he put it, she really was found in the middle of nowhere. A person getting off at I-95 at the Aberdeen exit would have had to drive around for a while to find that particular road. They may have come across it after making several lefts and rights, unless, of course, they were familiar with the area and knew where they were going. Hopkins said the area is also home to 2 sprawling military facilities, and as a result, countless transients. Our detectives really don't know if she was killed by somebody from around here or from someplace else and brought here, he said, explaining that the Aberdeen Proving Ground, a test site for military ordnance, and the former Edgewood Arsenal, where chemical and biological weapons are developed, are both nearby. Leon's murder was a cold case for 16 months, until last January, when an astute Connecticut woman and volunteer at the Doe Network, an organization devoted to helping law enforcement agencies solve cases concerning unexplained disappearances and unidentified victims, thought she recognized Leon from a Lynn Police Department website. Leon was listed as a missing person. The Doe Network urged the Maryland Sheriff's Office to check out the resemblance between the crime scene victim's photo and the picture of the missing Lynn woman. There was a startling resemblance, as a subsequent fingerprint comparison would reveal a perfect match. The victim's family had reported her missing in March of 2004. It might have done so sooner, but Leon had a habit of disappearing for weeks or months. Foul play was suspected when relatives found 2 uncashed Social Security checks in her Marion Street apartment. Homicide Detective Thomas Bradley of the Hartford County Sheriff's Office has been the lead investigator on the case since the body was found. According to Bradley, how Leon ended up in Maryland remains a mystery, as does the identity of her killer. Detectives are still hoping for a break in the case, perhaps an anonymous call from someone who saw Leon on September 14, 2003, or shortly before that date, and those that she may have been with. Bradley said adidentifying Leon gave detectives a big break in her case. With her identity confirmed, police again began disseminating detailed information related to the woman's tattoos, which include a tiger, a Playboy bunny, an eagle, a parrot, a rose, a half heart, and a butterfly. Leon was 5 feet 4 inches tall, with a petite build and brown hair. She was known to frequent Lynn establishments, such as the Arena Cafe, the Venice Cafe, and the House of Roast Beef. Before moving to Marion Street, she had lived in apartments on Washington Street and Park Street. During the past 2 years, Hartford County Sheriff's detectives exhausted every resource in trying to identify Leon. We sent lookouts and teletypes to police agencies and federal law enforcement agencies, including news releases and searched missing person databases for anyone who resembled her. Now, police hope that a description of Leon's distinctive tattoos may jog the memory of a potential witness, who in turn may remember seeing her with others near the time of the murder. It only takes one piece of the puzzle for the whole case to come together. It would not only bring closure to the case, but closure for Leon's family, too, said Bradley, adding that the 2-year anniversary of the crime might also spur someone to come forward with information. Kylan Johnson, the Maryland area director at the Doe Network, theorized in a published report by the Baltimore Sun newspaper that Leon may have been traveling with a carnival or living a drifter's lifestyle on the fringes of the law. According to Johnson, the victim was wearing a dolphin ring, a common trinket among carnival workers. As Maryland police continue the investigation, they ask that anyone with information call Detective Thomas Bradley at the Hartford County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigation Division, or his colleague, Detective Thomas Walsh. Lynn police are also anticipating any new leads. All information will be kept strictly confidential. Dean Merlin Lewis was last seen on September 25, 2003, entering Hamlin Beach State Park in New York, driving his 1987 Volkswagen van. Lewis, who is from San Francisco, California, was traveling the East Coast at the time of his disappearance. He stayed in campgrounds and state parks. He has never been heard from again. On September 29th, his van was found abandoned at Hamlin Beach State Park. The park authorities contacted police and reported Lewis's disappearance at this time. Lewis enjoys extensive traveling and has lived in his van, which has a kitchen and sleeping area, for months at a time. He relies on a trust fund to support himself. His family says he kept to himself, but it is uncharacteristic for him not to contact them for this long a time. Dean Lewis was 42 years old, 6 feet 1 inches tall, and 175 pounds. He has brown hair and blue eyes, and wears eyeglasses. Lewis wore his hair in a ponytail when he was last seen. His case remains unsolved.
Michael J. Howell was last seen on October 1st, 2003, at a bus station in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, taking a bus to Suffolk County, New York. He has never been seen or heard from again. Michael Howell was 21 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 165 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes.
Mark Allen Husk was last seen at his residence on Old Chicago Road in Ferrisburg, Vermont on October 12, 2003. He was not reported missing until November 5th, 3 weeks later. Husk is an avid sportsman and has a history of traveling around the country for long periods alone. He frequently traveled by bus or took the Amtrak train to New York City. Mark Husk was 49 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and 145 pounds. He has blonde hair and green eyes. Husk may wear wire-rimmed glasses. His case remains unsolved. Kathy Sue Haskell was last seen between 10 o'clock and 10:30 p.m. on October 16, 2003, at her residence in the vicinity of Coquina Bay Avenue in Corpus Christi, Texas. She told her husband, Andy, that she was stressed out over their finances and her weight, and she was leaving their home to unwind. He stayed home to watch their children. Haskell has never been heard from again. Haskell's burgundy 1996 Dodge Caravan was later located abandoned, with her purse, medication, and keys locked inside on a beach south of Bob Hall Pier, near State Highway 361 and Gulf Beach Road in Corpus Christi. There were no footprints in the sand around where the car was missing. One credit card was missing from her purse. No charges were made on it, and the account was canceled after her husband learned she was missing. Haskell was reported missing by her husband the day after her disappearance when he found her car. Andy had filed for divorce from Haskell on May 6, 2003, 5 months prior to her disappearance. He changed his mind and withdrew the filing 10 days later. 2 weeks after Haskell's disappearance, he filed for divorce again and sought a restraining order to prevent Haskell from returning and taking their son. Court documents stated that he believed Haskell had left him for another man and was associating with disreputable people at the time of her disappearance. Andy said the police had decided Haskell had been having an affair and left voluntarily, but investigators have publicly denied having reached that conclusion, say they have no evidence of her leaving town with anyone. Police say there's no evidence of suicide in her case, although she was being treated for depression around the time she vanished. Because her car was found abandoned, they are treating her disappearance as suspicious. An extensive search of the beach area where the car was found turned up no evidence as to her whereabouts. Kathy Sue Haskell was 41 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and around 160 pounds. She had red hair and blue eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
Rachel Nicole Good was last seen with friends in the parking lot behind the Elkton Volunteer Fire Department near the Coin Laundry off Spotswood Trail in Elkton, Virginia at approximately 6 p.m. on October 18, 2003. Her friends saw her get into her Dodge Neon and drive away as it got dark. She has never been heard from again. Her car was found parked at her home in the 100 block of Virginia Avenue in Elkton. Good was romantically involved with a married Elkton police officer, Adam Williams, at the time of her disappearance. He originally headed the investigation into her case. The Elkton police placed Williams on paid administrative leave after Good's disappearance and executed a search warrant on his home in connection with her case. He resigned from the force in January of 2004. Police were also interested in speaking to the driver of a red truck seen near Good's home at about noon on October the 19th, the day after her disappearance. The driver has not been identified and is not being called a suspect in her case. Prosecutors assembled a special grand jury to investigate Good's case in September of 2004, but no indictments were handed down. Authorities do not believe Good left Elkton of her own volition. They believe she was murdered, but little evidence is available in her case, and investigators do not believe they can prosecute anyone until Good's body is found. She left behind 3 children when she vanished, and she was 10 weeks pregnant. Rachel Good was 20 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed 180 pounds. She has blonde hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Lisa Magnolia Snellgrove was last seen at her residence in the vicinity of Live Oak in Apache Junction, Arizona, in the early morning hours of October 17, 2003. She has never been seen or heard from again. Few details are available in her case. Lisa Snellgrove was 5 feet 9, 145 pounds. She was 5 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She has a tattoo of the name Yuri Marie on her ankle. Her case remains unsolved. From the Times-Union paper, on February 17, 2017, 2 homicides possibly linked, Saratoga County Sheriff says. 2 redheaded young women disappeared in the early 2000s from mobile home parks in Milton. Years later, hunters found their remains less than 5 miles apart, hidden deep in the woods of Greenfield. Neither slaying has been solved. Investigators do know one thing: their deaths are most likely related. Saratoga County Sheriff Michael Zerlo said the similarities are uncanny. They lived in close proximity of each other, he said. One was 18 years old, the other was 19, when they disappeared on summer days 2 years apart. Zerlo declined to say how the women died, saying investigators want to see if tips match their facts. The cold cases resurfaced Friday after the sheriff's office published the details of unsolved homicides online in the hopes of generating new leads. Any little thing helps, Zerlo said. The webpage states there's a strong possibility that 2003 and 2005 deaths of the 2 young women are related. 18-year-old Jennifer Moonbeam Hammond was reported missing on November 2, 2003. She was last seen in August selling magazine subscriptions door to door at the Creek and Pines Mobile Home Park on Middle Line Road in Milton. Co-workers with Atlantic Circulation had dropped off Hammond by herself. 2 hours later, she did not show up at their designated pickup spot. Hammond was from Littleton, Colorado, but had been staying at an Albany hotel with 5 other co-workers. All of her belongings were left behind there when she vanished. She'd made arrangements for a bus ticket home, but the ticket was never picked up, and she had no further contact with her family. 6 years after her disappearance, a hunter found partial human skull fragments and 3 teeth on the ground deep in the woods near Lake Desolation in Greenfield on October 25, 2009. A state police forensic expert confirmed the remains were Hammond's. 19-year-old Christina White was reported missing in 2005. She was last seen by family members the night of June 30th, leaving her home in Saratoga Village Mobile Home Park in Milton. Witnesses told police they saw White walking along the road near Geyser and Roland Street. A year later, on March 10, 2006, a hunter found her skeletal remains in the Daketown Forest in Greenfield. Authorities believe she was stabbed to death. Zerlo said he hopes that by publicizing the women's cases and the other 3 unsolved homicides, his office will motivate someone to come forward with new information. We're hoping this can stir some activity, he said. Saratoga County investigators are also probing these 3 unrelated cold cases. On July 6, 1988, a passing truck driver found 28-year-old Pamela Ann DeVizio's body in a ditch on the side of Putnam Road, just east of Jacob Drive. He called the sheriff's office at 9:45 a.m. DeVizio's father had reported her missing to Sarasota Springs police the day before her body was found. He told police his daughter hadn't returned his phone calls and wasn't at the apartment that she shared with another woman and hadn't shown up for work at Mangino's restaurant. DeVizio worked at the Malta restaurant as a waitress and was known to enjoy Saratoga Springs nightlife. She regularly partied with other food services employees, and she was last seen leaving a bar on Caroline Street by herself in the early morning hours of July the 5th. DeVizio was bludgeoned to death, with the blows primarily landing on her head. Police believe she'd been dead for about 30 hours when her body was discovered. The remains were damaged by the heat, insects, and a dog. On July 8, 1993, police found 37-year-old Betty Conley dead, with a single gunshot wound to the head, at about 3 a.m. inside a Charlton Extra Mart. Conley worked at the Route 67 shop as a clerk. Cash had been stolen from the register. Witnesses told police a mid-1980s white sedan with a rust spot, partially covered in primer on the driver's door, had been parked in the lot. Witnesses also said a white man in his early to mid-30s, wearing a peach-colored tank top, had come to the store. He was described as a clean-shaven, 6'2" man with a medium build and blonde shoulder-length hair. On August 6, 2001, family members reported 28-year-old Peter Lorang missing after a week without contact. Lorang lived alone on Cook Road in Charlton. His 1994 Chrysler convertible was missing, and his dog was home alone without food or water. Almost 2 weeks after he was reported missing, on August the 18th, his car was towed from a private parking lot in Albany. It had been parked there for 2 to 3 days. His disappearance has not been ruled a homicide, but investigators have labeled the circumstances as suspicious. Anyone with information on these 5 cases is asked to contact Saratoga County investigators through their phone number or through their website.
Oh, and I forgot to tell you, there was a Popeye that year. There was a Popeye up in Maine, and I was I was trying to work out like who lived where when, and it looks to me like nobody really lived in New York, really, like after he went into the Army. There's this guy, Roy Bilford, and on October 3rd, 2003, it's a Monday, he goes out in his boat, which is the Sharon Marie. He's a lobster guy. He's an older guy, like 70-something. So he goes out, and, they come across him later, and they find the boat running with the lobster buoy and the hauler, but they don't find him. So I thought he fit Popeye, although there's no more information. Because of the way that went down, the assumption is they went over in the water. But that's October 2003, and it's up in Maine. It's right at the mouth of one of the rivers there. And I liked him for Marilyn LaHan up in Maine. That's the craziest story. I don't actually know. Like, supposedly the husband was really cooperative, but she's like right as we move over into 2004. And the way that I can't tell if she's a dumping ground case, like where they just don't know when she went missing or what. But one report says that she hadn't been seen since July 2002. She's reported early 2004, sort of, but her family didn't report her missing until 2013. And so she's in Eastport, Maine too. And, she's another one of those cases that when I look at it on the surface, it's like, oh, the husband did it, but maybe not. Maybe whatever was happening there, like, it is legit. And maybe she is one of those people that just went unreported or unnoticed that he talks about.
David Henry Coors was last seen in Owego, New York on November 30th, 2003. His ATM card was used in Lindenhurst on December 8th of 2003, but he has not been seen or heard from since. Few details are available in his case. David Coors was 27 years old, 6 feet tall, 180 pounds. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved.
And the last case that I took a look at in 2003 was another murdered lawyer.
From the station working for you, this is ABC 27 News in high definition.
Good evening, I'm Alicia Richards.
And I'm Al Ganosa. Thank you for joining us. It's been 10 years since a federal prosecutor was found dead in rural Lancaster County. 10 years, and police still can't say for sure how he died.
Did someone kill him, or was he responsible for his own demise? Allie Lanyon investigates this mid-state mystery, the death of Jonathan Luna.
We will find out who did this, and we are dedicated to bringing the persons responsible for this tragedy to justice.
That was nearly 10 years ago. Then Maryland U.S. Attorney Tom DiBaggio vowing to seek justice for Jonathan Luna. But 10 years later, not much has changed. It was December of 2003. The 38-year-old Luna was prosecuting 2 suspected heroin dealers in Baltimore. He was working late crafting plea deals when, without his glasses, which he apparently needed to drive, or his cell phone, he left the courthouse and drove a mysterious path through 4 states, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, before getting off the Pennsylvania Turnpike in Lancaster County. His body was found behind Sensenig and Weaver well drilling in Brecknock Township, stabbed 36 times. But the cause of death, the married father of 2 had drowned in this stream.
He was trying to run away. He was terrified.
Author William Kiesling wrote a book about the case.
It was a murder. It was clearly a murder. The guy had been viciously killed outside of Lancaster.
The Lancaster County coroner at the time agreed and ruled the case a homicide. But soon reports surfaced the FBI was pressuring him to change that ruling to suicide. Investigators said the weapon was likely Luna's own penknife.
The police reports say that there was a pool of blood in the rear passenger seat. So what are they saying? That a U.S. attorney was driving across 4 states, stabbing himself in the back, cutting his throat, laying in the... Is the Justice Department hiring insane people? It's ridiculous.
But some believe it's not so far-fetched. Jonathan Luna was under investigation for the disappearance of $36,000, stolen evidence from a federal bank robbery case he had prosecuted. You'll recall he was stabbed 36 times. Was he trying to stage some sort of attack and went too far? The idea that his life wasn't as perfect as his smile let on was slowly leaked to the press after his death. Rumors of problems with work, money, and his marriage.
The guy was repeatedly lynched. He was killed in this vicious manner, and then he was totally destroyed of character and reputation.
Kiesling believes that Luna's death was more likely connected to his final trial. He says court transcripts show the case was falling apart, that Luna was uncomfortable with one of the plea deals, and he says the trial had exposed the possible mishandling of an FBI informant.
I believe he was more likely than not killed by somebody either active in the drug trade or in the employ of somebody active in the drug trade.
When State Representative Mark Cohen learned about Luna's death and the idea that it was anything other than a vicious murder, he wrote to the Justice Department asking for an independent investigation, to no avail.
It's just a very odd situation. It's a depressing situation. It sort of indicates that under some limited circumstances, people can get away with things.
They don't want the public to look at this. Instead, they want the public to think that he traveled across 4 states, stabbing himself in the back, slitting his own throat, slashing his own hands. He deserves better than this.
Allie Lanyon, ABC 27.
When asked about the Luna case, the FBI referred ABC 27 to the state police, who would only say the case is open and active.
Tom DiBaggio, the former U.S. attorney who vowed to seek justice 10 years ago, did not return our repeated calls. And we'll be right back.
Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LABROTTIECREATIONS.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more. You can come over to Patreon.com and check out what we've got going on there if you'd like to donate to fund future True Crime XS road trip investigations and FOIA requests. We'd also like to thank Anchor and Spotify for having the coolest all-in-one podcast platforms available. Definitely download the Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to start your own show today.
This is True Crime XS.
The way it's going to work is we're going to have somebody with some criminology. Somebody's going to have to use the luminol and the black lights, and that's going to be complicated because of the locations. And then we're going to need an archaeologist. And then I found a couple of interesting characters along the way that I don't know how to explain it. It's like this one guy finds art. It's the weirdest thing. And there's another guy, he does old boneyards, so he would be able to see the former locations and to help us sort of track the replacements, I guess. You know, so my thinking is, like, with the structures themselves, you can run down, like, blood, basically, presumptive tests for blood. And if we do that, it's going to take some time, but I think they're all relatively recoverable. And the water ones, the only ones I'm worried about are the ones when he actually had the boat. So everything prior to 2005 and everything after 2006 should be recoverable.
Well, and I don't see how you're going to distinguish anything on an endoscope or whatever you use.
Well, I don't know yet. I mean, there are people better at this task than myself, both amateur and professional.
But what do you imagine seeing? Like, what makes you think that it's a good idea?
I'd imagine seeing bone or plastic sheet or a number of things.
Well, now, okay, so he did use
the tie-beam sheet. The I can't think of the name of it, but it's the sheet that you use in construction to wrap Samantha Koenig. If you look at the warrants, they reference it.
Yeah, no, I saw, and he also he used some sort of wire twine or something.
Yeah, he used a couple of different things there. That was the wire was for securing the body and the plastic and the weight all together. But
but he also took pieces and.
Okay. Yes, you're correct. He basically, this is what he did, and I'll say it this way, and we'll move on from it because I know this makes you squeamish. He butcher papered the body. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. He wrapped it like a garbagé at a butcher shop would do it, and he dropped it with weights. But here is what I gleaned from the accounts of that made me also back up the body disposal method we come up with. That is a goddamn nightmare. That takes hours to do that correctly and leave no evidence. Like trying to dispose of a body, and at one point he offered up a buck knife or something, and he was like, you could look underneath the parts of the handle where it folds, and I'm like, what were you doing with that you want them to believe? Because human bodies are incredibly complicated to dismember correctly. They make lots of mess. I think I don't know if he went that far with the other ones, but weighting down the bodies, I'm going to bet that's not something he spent a lot of time doing, making those boat anchors to do that.
Did he make boat anchors?
Yeah, he made the concrete boat anchors. He did the same thing that Scott Peterson did.
Okay, yeah.
He did that when he was doing Samantha Koenig. He had the boat anchors he had made up. So wait, and he described that. Yeah.
Have you ever realized that Scott Peterson was convicted on only circumstantial evidence? There is not even a drop of physical evidence linking him to the murders.
Well, that's
anyway
mostly true. That's not 100.
What did they find? What did they find to link him?
Okay, so one of my problems with his case is that he was convicted of a lot of special circumstances that were not proven.
Well, okay, murder. Let's just go with that.
The physical evidence that they presented, which there is a lack of direct evidence. I'll say that.
There was no evidence.
The physical evidence they presented was interesting. They basically presented evidence from his home that he had cleaned, and they presented evidence that, or someone had cleaned, not necessarily him, and that someone had made bone anchors, with concrete, exactly like we're describing. So,
okay, but that's still not physical evidence of murder.
No, but it's
circumstantial. That's what it is. It's circumstantial.
You're saying they didn't have
anything.
Hair? Well, they had hair on the pliers in the boat. That was a piece of forensic evidence that I remember them presenting.
I didn't see that.
So, and I actually couldn't swear whether or not it was hers. I just remember them presenting that piece of evidence because I remember it being a bombshell thing that I read about. But the other thing about that case was they had evidence of the affair, and they thought they had evidence of him fleeing, preparing to flee.
Okay, still, none of that stuff is physical evidence for murder.
Well, I mean, You're not wrong.
This is what physical evidence for murder is.
A dead body.
This is what physical evidence of a murderer is. It is fingerprints of a person on a weapon, the result of the weapon being used seen on the victim. Okay.
Okay.
Does that make, like, for example, a hammer?
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
Somebody's fingerprints on the handle of the hammer, the victim's blood and brain matter on the hammer part of the hammer. Okay. Now even that evidence right there could be refuted, because if somebody used the hammer for something other than bludgeoning somebody to death, their fingerprints might still be on there. Okay. I took issue just briefly because honestly, I can't imagine who else would have killed Laci Peterson and her baby. I don't even think Keys would have done that, honestly. And I did consider it though, because that would have been around the time. Well, actually, no, it was a little later. But
I thought about the same thing you just were mentioning, by the way. And at one point, you accused me of putting too many pregnant women on the list. I had a real specific reason for doing that.
Oh, yeah, because he was like, I know. But, okay, so while I believe in, I believe Scott Peterson probably killed his wife, because, I can't imagine anybody else doing it. But he didn't really receive a fair trial.
Well, I'm not saying if he did or didn't. And by the way, I also considered Peterson for that case. I mean, I considered this killer for the Peterson case.
Okay.
But here's my issue.
It wasn't him.
Well, it had to be someone like him if it's not Scott Peterson. To me, I didn't really look much further than Scott Peterson because, that was a pretty classic familicide attack.
Right. He just wanted a new life.
That's the gist of it. Like, you're annihilating your family. Typically, it would be a spousal murder, except the kid's involved, so that becomes annihilation. However, a lot of those killers wait till the kid is born. But here's the other thing about that. The body wasn't at home. Okay, so it's not going to be a standard murder. It is either the husband or it's someone like this killer if you take the body away from the home. And that's it. That's your only options. It's not a burglary. It's not random gypsies. It's not whatever other nonsense the defense came up with. Those are your only two options. And you have to look at other cases like Chris Watts. 2 kids and a wife are killed. The reason they're killed and taken is because they connect to the home. They connect him to the murder. It's sort of delusional to think of it that way, but that is the truth.
Well, okay, so beyond, the logical reasons why Scott Peterson killed Laci Peterson and their unborn son, Connor, I took issue with it mainly because, you said there was a hair on some flyers, and perhaps that was a thing. I would certainly
I remember hearing
that.
someone like Nancy Grace talk about it. That's all I know right this second. I would have to go Google it.
So I would have to look at, what was actually used. But I did recently watch something on Scott Peterson, and I know they didn't give all the information. However, what I gleaned from that, what I watched and what I knew, otherwise, he was sent to death row without any physical evidence. And that should scare the hell out of everybody. Whether he killed her or not is irrelevant. It's more so the process that fell apart there. People should not be convicted of murder and sentenced to death based only on circumstantial evidence. ever. It just so happens that the California governor put a moratorium on the death penalty, so it's not like he's actually going to be put to death before, I don't know how long that governor will be in. But to me, it's frightening, because what if he didn't do it? Mm-hmm. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but at the same, and I don't have sympathy for him really, but I do think that I think there's something to be learned from that case, because you really do have to have some sort of physical evidence, or, you know, a recount of the event, for example, on, you know, some sort of security camera, that kind of thing, or physical evidence. And circumstantial evidence should not be enough. And, you know, it used to not be enough, but I guess it's so hard to actually come up with physical evidence in a lot of cases that they can't, you know, the conviction rate would be very low. But people on juries need to kind of think about and see it's hard to see, like, okay, even if you know he killed her, you can't convict them because there's no physical evidence. But that's really how the court system is supposed to work.
Well, so what ultimately, you know, ruled Israel Keys out there is the same thing that rules Scott Peterson in. And I know you're not convinced about the death penalty part of it, which I can't really speak for or against the death penalty part, because I get ambivalent, like, depending on the crime. And I do think that the Lacey Peterson, Connor Peterson murder was terrible. You know, it's ultimately a coffin birth and the murder of a mother. How do you, so Keys isn't going to have a boat if he comes down there, because I could place him in that area. And I could
right,
place
but
him.
Also her body was found just like 4 months after she went missing.
Right. And that's the other part of it. But I didn't find where I could look at it and go, yeah, he's definitely there, and he definitely has access to a boat, because I could do one or the other during that time. Like I could put Keys other place. I just had to look hard enough, and I could find him. And he does get close to there, but at that time in 2002, I think it was around Christmas, but I don't know that for sure. I thought I placed him in Maine, and that started to make me wonder, you know, if I was missing something, because he does get to Modesto, California, and other places around there. How does he have a boat? You know what I mean?
Right. That doesn't make any sense unless he rented one.
I mean, so the truth is, like, my ultimate goal with everything related to this guy is that, like, enough evidence could be found that, like, a lot of shit got closed out, but like anything that was like proximal to that, or in the, you know, that range of time or whatever, you know, you build a bigger timeline, so to speak, and you start to look at, like, how big of a monster is he? You know, is it 11 people, or is it more like 85 or something? I don't know what those shake out to be, but, you know, the more bodies you find, the more, you know, you can look at their cases individually and start to shape his timeline based on when those people.
And to me, I've never once, beyond somebody else asking me, it's never been about how many. I look at, like, everything I come across, and that's usually, you know, missing persons type cases. Because I don't care how many people he killed. I do care who he killed. And it does become, like, a relevant thing in other ways. But to me, it was more important to look at each case that I looked at and evaluate it for what it was. And it goes pretty quick as far as, you know, no, maybe. Am I right? I don't know, but I can't operate with endless possibilities. I would never get anything done. There were certain parts of it that really did for example, with Lacey Peterson, the bodies being found were more likely than anything else. Now, in my opinion, to make a case solvable, which is all, you and I have set out to do, really, because it's all we can do. Not provable, but solvable. Like, we don't have to have the physical evidence. It just has to make enough sense. It'd be great if we found the bodies, whether or not there was physical evidence to link Israel Keys to it or not.
Well, that's the other thing.
Because that's still a resolution.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that became sort of a catchphrase for me early on, just like a mantra, like an internal thing was, I really wanted to know where the bodies were and who we could bring home. And, like, I actually got that from one of the attorneys that were interviewing him. And it's the Frank Russo interviews. He flat out says, I mean, and, I like to think that those two guys, Feldis and Russo, were being very genuine. Mainly from the perspective of, I don't think they knew how else to be. They knew how to be lawyers, and then the two of them found themselves in the room with the killer. And the two of them finding themselves in the room with the killer was not they didn't set that out. They did it because there was a case that they needed to close. And they wanted to get as much information once they realized he was a monster. And then they said, both of them sort of said, we were looking for closure for these cases. And I think they both got the sense that he was something monstrous, or, at least had the potential to be. And they wanted to close cases. And the closing the cases part has ongoing been my big thing. The bodies coming home doesn't have a secondary place for me. Because, I can't think of anything worse than that. I cannot think of anything worse than someone walking out the door to go on a trip or to go about the day-to-day routine and never being seen again. Now, am I doing it for them? Not really. I'm doing it for all the people left behind in those situations. And some of them maybe don't give a shit, but some of them care, and some of them have reported their loved one missing, and some of them have gone to great lengths to try and find them.
From Dave at skeptical-science.com on January 27, 2013. Beware the logic of Sherlock Holmes. While in a debate recently, one chap justified his assertion by deploying the following quote: "When you dismiss the impossible, whatever you have left, however improbable, is the answer. Recognize it? Yep, Sherlock Holmes. Or Spock, if you prefer." Well, the precise quote is this: "You will not apply my precept," he said, shaking his head. "How often have I said to you that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth? We know that he did not come through the door, the window, or the chimney. We also know that he could not have been concealed in the room, as there is no concealment possible. When, then, did he come?" Sherlock Holmes, from The Sign of the Four, Chapter 6. It sounds great, but quoting a fictitious character to justify a logical stance should set alarm bells ringing. Since this quote is so well known, let's take a brief look at it. First, was Arthur Conan Doyle a good logical thinker? Not really. This is the same guy who was conned by a couple of teenage girls into thinking that fairies were real. Looking at the famous Cottingley Fairies picture, you can clearly see that all the girls did was cut out a few cardboard figures. That was the immediate conclusion of the family, but unfortunately, the pictures got into circulation, and eventually Conan Doyle heard about them and was totally convinced they were real, even going as far as writing stuff like this: "My heart was gladdened when out here in far Australia I had your note and the 3 wonderful pictures which are confirmatory of our published results. When our fairies are admitted, other psychic phenomena will find a more ready acceptance. We have had continued messages at seances for some time that a visible sign was coming through. You can insert your facepalm here. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that the famous and often quoted phrase clearly did not work for the author himself. Why not? Well, because it contains a couple of logical fallacies. Have you truly eliminated all other options as impossible? If you have one last thing that is improbable, then there are a lot of possibilities here. And this last improbable conclusion should not be simply accepted. While it should of course be given due consideration, what about the following? Are all the other options truly impossible? In the case of fairies, why eliminate the possibility of fraud as impossible when that is the most probable? Perhaps the very premise itself is wrong. In fact, have you truly eliminated all other possibilities? Is it not more possible that there is a simpler alternative that you have not yet considered? Sherlock Holmes may indeed be great fiction, but in the real world, the ability to posit a long string of events perfectly is more likely to lead one to a false conclusion. Don't lean upon the flawed logic of fictional characters. If you do, then you may indeed end up embracing complete fiction as fact.